Welcome back to another start to finish room renovation. This time we're in this small bathroom attached to my parents' front bedroom, the one we took from this to this. And now it's time to give the same treatment to this chaotic bathroom. It's got a lot going on. Textured turquoise walls, a pedestal sink on an actual pedestal because it's too short to use otherwise, a strange mix of traditional pieces and super modern lighting, and of course a TV above the clawfoot tub because why not? There are also a lot of details like this storage cabinet that look okay from far away, but up close it's a big old mess. A full-on Monet, some might say. So let's fix it. We're starting in here with demo so I can have a nice clean slate to work with once everything is out. If you've ever tried to remove these kinds of hooks, you'll get me because I didn't have the right size hex key to remove it, so I had to pry it off with brute strength. Thankfully, the metal underneath was weak and bent to my will, but that also shows you the cheap quality of these hooks. Good riddance. Then it was time to remove the sink, which was heavy and proves it was an authentic vintage cast iron sink. But the problem is that they were just built for shorter people when people had less milk in their diet, I guess, which is why the old owners had to build this platform to lift it up to a modern height. So that already made it look wonky, but I also just have beef with pedestal sinks in general because they're a waste of storage space. And as you discussed, this house doesn't have any closets, so my goal is to add as much storage back in as possible. So that means replacing the sink. But don't worry, it didn't get trashed. I placed it by the side of the road and someone picked it up within 20 minutes. Off to its new home. This pedestal was a beast to demo, especially while trying not to chip the marble tiles around it. I was whipping out all the saws until it finally pried up. And I was hoping that the tile ran under the platform, but no luck. So I'll have to figure out a way to patch it because we're keeping this tile. Then on to removing these sconces, which by the way are absurdly high in the air. Same for the sconces in the other bathroom in this house. I just don't get it. So we'll have to get these moved down too. Then it was time to say goodbye to this wonky gold cabinet. I have something much larger and sturdier in mind for up here. And then of course there's this TV. The old owners loved having TVs all throughout the house, and that's the beauty of DIY. You can make whatever kind of house you want. But we don't really want TVs everywhere, especially above this tub, because I want to convert it into a shower. And that sounds like a good way to electrocute yourself. So the TV had to go. From there, I had to get the clawfoot tub out of the room, which was the part I'd been dreading because these things are cast iron and heavy. Thankfully, I was able to make it work with some large furniture sliders under each of the feet without throwing out my back or scratching the marble tile. There is one little built-in medicine cabinet in here, which is great to have for storage, so I'm gonna keep it, but just remove all the doors and trim so they can fully integrate it into the new design plan that I have for the room. Demo complete. Then my plumbers came and moved the sink drain line from the floor to the wall so that we can prepare this space for a vanity. I took on the drywall repair because I like to save a little money wherever I can, so I just cobbled the drywall they cut off back on the wall. The good news is that this does not need to be perfect, not even close, because I have some other fun plans for this wall. But first, the tile. I was able to find the same tiles online, but to patch them in, I need to remove all the partial tiles that have been cut around the platform. I used a chisel and mallet and just tried to work slowly and carefully. This was tricky because the surrounding marble tiles also wanted to chip. If you have to do this, I'd suggest investing in a Dremel tool to grind out the grout, or do what I did and score the grout with a chisel first before trying to pry up the partial tiles so that they don't put pressure on the surrounding bits. Once the space was all cleaned up, I got to work cutting the tiles on my wet saw. If you're doing a big tiling project, I highly recommend getting one of these. It has a laser to make cuts super precise and just feels really safe. Even the blade is only a grinder blade, so if your finger accidentally gets caught, it won't feel great, but it won't cut it off either. I do recommend using some painter's tape along your cut lines to prevent chipping, especially with fragile marble tiles like these. Then it was time to patch. I closed up the old drain hole with a wood plug and then coated everything in mortar and started laying my tiles, being careful to make sure they're level with their existing neighbors. And then we're done with tile. No, just kidding, not in the slightest, because look at this ugly, nasty stained grout. It used to be white, and that's the problem with grout, the nasty staining, or at least most grouts. I started using an epoxy-like grout in my tile jobs that doesn't stain and is super easy to clean. But look, you can see that the old grout wasn't applied super well. It's too low and doesn't reach the surface of the tiles. It's even chipping in some places. And that's good news for me. It means that instead of cleaning this grout, I can just grout over it with my favorite non-staining grout. But first, I need to seal all these tiles because they're marble and can be stained by the grout. So with real epoxy grout, you have to mix two parts together and it hardens quickly, so you have to work fast. That's a problem for me because I'm a sloth. I overthink everything and don't like to be rushed. So that's why I like this epoxy-like grout. It gives the same durability as the epoxy stuff, but comes in a pre-mixed tub that's easy to use and has more working time. This sounds like an ad, but it's not. I'm just a super fan. Laticrete, call me. Okay, you can't tell me this isn't satisfying, watching that yellowed nastiness turn bright white. It's a beautiful thing. And here's a reminder of these tiles before and after. A million times better, in my opinion. And at this point, y'all must know that it's not a Renee Renovates project unless I'm learning how to build something for the first time. In this room, I'm building my first wall cabinet to go above the toilet. And I want to try as much as possible to make it look like a mirror image of the existing medicine cabinet on the opposite side of the room, while also incorporating it into the trim I have in mind so it doesn't just look like a block floating in the air. I also bought a shelf pin jig for this project so that I can make these shelves adjustable. And to be a little reduce, reuse, recycle about things, I repurposed the old medicine cabinet doors for the shelves. While it was already covered in dust, I also ripped down some beveled edges on this trim, and I'll show you what these are for later. But first, the cabinet. I designed this so that all the pocket holes will be hidden as much as possible, which again took a lot of math and planning, which is why I try to sketch everything down because I will inevitably forget once it's time to assemble. Now this is a 3/4 inch thick plywood shell, so it's heavy, and I needed to find a way to get it secured to the wall by myself. So I used my favorite hack, which is screwing these scrap pieces of wood into the studs as supports, and then just lifting and sliding the cabinet on them so that it can rest there while I'm securing it to the wall. Then you just remove the supports and patch the holes later. Highly recommend. Okay, here's where things get fun. We're starting the trim. Instead of skim coating the textured walls smooth, we're just covering them up with lots of wainscoting. Traditionally, wainscoting extends 1/3, 2/3, or all the way up a wall. And here we're going for 2/3 so that I can blend the top of the cabinet into the top of the trim. Again, the goal is for the cabinet to look like it belongs and not just a big block floating in the air. This trim looks fancy, but it's just a 1x6 with that bevel trim we made earlier laid on top. Then I added the face frame to the cabinet and started installing all of the vertical trim pieces. My goal is for these to feel connected to the cabinet face frames so that, again, visually the cabinet looks connected. For the rest of the room, I made the 1x4 vertical pieces cut the walls into sections less than 4 feet wide so that I can fill them with 4x8 sheets of hardboard next with no visible seams. I also added an additional horizontal piece for the vanity section so that the backsplash has something to rest against, and replaced the trim above the door so that the doorway also melds into the trim. Now these are the kinds of details I never even think about at first and then wake up randomly in the middle of the night realizing I need to do. That's one of the benefits of working on a project slowly. Your brain has time to overthink and correct your designs. Then it was hardboard time. I had to calculate the size of each of these boxes, subtract a little bit for wiggle room, and also figure out where I needed to make special cuts for outlets and plumbing. Fortunately, this stuff is pretty lightweight and very easy to cut. It also instantly smooths out the textured walls. It's a beautiful thing. I didn't worry too much about getting the edges perfectly straight and pretty because the next step is covering the scraggly edges with trim. For the base cap trim I'm putting here, I find it easiest to make my cut list first, make all my cuts, and then start piecing them in place. Just less walking back and forth. But see how the trim just closes up all those scraggly gaps and adds even more visual interest to the trim? Love it. If you have outlets close to the edge of the trim like this, you can either wind the trim around it or just cut them off like this with some returns. Lots of filling and sanding for all the nail holes and joints, and this is honestly the worst part and fully broke my nail, which I just taped closed with painter's tape so I could keep going. I feel like this moment should earn me some kind of DIY merit badge. Then lots and lots of caulking, and it was finally time to get ready for paint prep. I started by removing the ceiling vents, which I primed outside with some leftover spray paint, and then I primed all the bare hardboard and trim in the bathroom before suiting up to spray the paint. This bathroom is so small that I couldn't take my camera inside without it getting covered in spray dust, so sorry, this is your view. And someone needs to invent breathable coveralls for painting because I swear these things are sauna suits. But here's a little preview of the paint color. A lovely medium blue with a little bit of warmth because we're going to use some brass hardware in here. I also sprayed the ceiling vent covers to make sure they had the same finish. While I sanded between coats and continued painting and waiting for things to dry, I got started on the clawfoot tub. The request for this room was for it to feel light and airy, so I'm repainting the entire tub in white but keeping the gold feet. And here's a look at the dried paint. Isn't it pretty? Now, would I have chosen a medium blue bathroom to connect with a medium blue bedroom? No. But this isn't my house, so I'm just following orders. What I do get to pick are all the features like the trim and this beautiful ceiling light that looks like a happy cloud. From there, I started converting the clawfoot tub into a shower, which included cutting this shower ring to size and spraying at the warm brass tome we're using throughout the room before installing it. Now this tub is extra long, so I had to use a shower ring I haven't tried before, and it honestly felt a bit flimsy and required me to buy and install extra supports. So I'll link the shower ring I actually like and recommend in the description instead. Okay, remember that pedestal sink? Here's its replacement. A ridiculously beautiful walnut vanity with a marble top. We also have a lovely brass faucet in here and these sconces that I'm obsessed with. This wavy milky glass is so pretty next to the bentwood mirror. The final step in here was building the cabinet doors, and I'm gonna be honest, I was a little stressed and rushed for time with these. For my kitchen, I built my doors with mortise and tenon joints, and that's definitely the best way. But for these, I just took the easier route and glued thin strips of plywood onto a thicker sheet of plywood to create the shaker door look, and then drilled the holes for my cabinet hinges before priming and painting. Then of course, there were some final touches because I love paying attention to the details, like these wood outlet covers that are paintable and blend into the wainscoting. And here's a reminder of this bathroom before. A hodgepodge of different styles with some questionable features. And here's what it looks like now. Walnut and marble details throughout to break up that blue color drench, and it honestly feels like a fancy hotel bathroom to me. But just don't look too closely at the inset cabinet doors, okay? They could use some tweaking, but for my first attempt at inset, they're not too shabby. All right, now that you've seen the full bathroom transformation, I'd love to know what you think. What's your favorite detail in here?